Okay, well, for people who are joining us on the live stream, this is a working meeting working on features of Wolfram Language which have been tagged as experimental, but which we are trying to get polished enough that we can consider them going forward as not experimental. So there's a whole variety of different areas we're going to be covering. The first one is about interpreter.
Just one specific interpreter.
And we currently consider that interpreter, but how does find geolocation work? Isn't that is find geolocation using the
it's multiple things, right? The street address interpreter is one of the paths that an input can take through that, because that can also take an IP address. It can try to do geolocation other ways. If it's a street address, then it's going through the street address interpreter.
So something like that.
Right.
On earth is that ITRF00? That's the datum. Wow, it knows that. That's kind of wild.
That's news to me. That's interesting.
It can't.
That's actually I know about that. There was an inconsistency in the way that geoposition was handled for when the first argument was a list of lists. It always had datum, and it never had in other cases. And Jose fixed this by making the non-listed version also always display the datum.
What? That doesn't make sense. I don't mean that. I mean this. That doesn't display the datum.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
I think that the point is that happens when you specify a datum, and such is the case, for example, for interpreter. So when you transform something without a datum into something with a datum, and ITRF00 is the default that we take when there's
I don't understand. This doesn't seem right to me. It seems kind of overly fussy. And if we really know, where you are from a street address to a level of accuracy that depends on the datum, something is very funky. So I'm just saying I don't think that's right, and we should check that. Do you believe it's affirmatively that it's correct, or do you simply know some backstory to it?
I tend to think that it's correct, and I know the backstory. If you want, I can send you the bug.
I think we need Jose if we're going to address this. Is Jose going to join this meeting later for something else? Let's loop back. Who's in charge of this interpreter thing from a project management point of view?
I think this is effectively me, Alan.
Okay.
I mean, the find geolocation is a separate thing because it involves also some of the working with IP addresses. I think for the street address interpreter, my suggestion was I think there are still improvements we could make that I would be happier to try making before we call it non-experimental, but I don't think those can happen on a version 12 timescale.
Okay, but I mean, you think
another point release, I think there are things we can do, but we have other geo things that are ahead of street address.
I'm concerned about this. I think this is funky, and I think it's going to cause us trouble. So can we try and get Jose, please, so that you can...
Yeah, I'll call him.
And meanwhile, Carlos sent me the bug. Geo position used. This is a very recent bug.
Yeah, because I found it while working in interpreter. Yeah. So I'm making some changes to interpreter to make it much faster on listed inputs.
Okay, so fine. Let's get hold of Jose and let's ask him about this. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. So I don't object, Alan, to leaving this as experimental, although I don't think the design is going to change. I think it's merely going to be
right. It's just a matter of improving the data, really. But I think that keeping it experimental for now lowers people's expectations to the right level a bit. I I'd like to get rid of it soon, but there are just other geo things ahead of it.
Right. I had no idea that New York City and Champaign were on the essentially exact same latitude. Well, what do you know? Okay. All right. So if Jose is going to join us in a moment, then we'll wait for him. Otherwise, let's move on to the next item.
He's on his way. I just had a chat with him.
Okay. Well, let's just wait for him. But then the next thing we're going to be looking at, why is ask starred like that?
I guess glob pattern matching, like there are a bunch of ask symbols.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll name it better next time.
Okay. All right, fine. I feel like ask has not had adequate user, usage at this point to be confident about it. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think that I mean I know for a fact that we always find new bugs, and also I wanted to replace the way ask worked to be using persistent value at the cookie level, but I don't know.
What about web sessions? I mean, that should be. How does ask relate to web sessions?
Jose's with us.
Yes, I'm
okay.
here.
Oh, okay. Let's just deal with the issue with geoposition. Okay, yeah. So find geolocation is now apparently, as of very recently, returning a geoposition. Find geolocation is returning a geoposition that has its datum explicitly being stated. This seems overly detailed and confusing to people. What's going on?
Something that has changed recently is that when we do a conversion like geoposition of another geoposition and the external geoposition has a datum, then it is preserved because it is understood that if the user wanted it in the first place, we should preserve it. So I can imagine that what happens here is that at some point, some part of the code is trying to do a conversion to ITRF00 explicitly. And that's why it is preserved.
Okay, but I don't think I mean, in terms of user level, when you say find geolocation with a street address, we should not be giving a datum.
I fully agree, yes.
Okay.
I'm just trying to guess what the code is doing because I
understand. But so Carlo has said that there's a reason. I mean, there's apparently a bug here, which is.
Yeah, that's what Jose was mentioning.
This is what I was mentioning. Yeah.
I don't know how find geoposition works, but for interpreter, that would show up because basically the default for the interpreter has a default datum. I could change that.
Okay, fine. I think
right. I think the interpreter should not explicitly ask for a transformation. It should just return whatever is given to it.
Yeah, okay, I can change it. The thing is that in the restriction, you can ask for a transformation. And so the default transformation is from ITRF00 to ITRF00.
Okay, so you guys need to sort this out. It sounds like there's some code path that's needed there. Doesn't sound like. Okay, all right, let's move on. I think that's everything we needed from Jose. Is that correct?
He is also here for theorem proving, which is pretty much at the bottom. But
okay, fine. So he should come back when we get to that.
Right.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thanks a lot. See ya.
See you.
Okay. So let's talk about ask for a minute. Okay. Again, I was asking about web sessions and what has happened to conversation page.
Well, the same, I mean, conversation page and ask, and also conversation API, if we ever do that, are largely the same thing. And and since I wanted to put some work into ask to make it use cookies instead of like the mechanism we have now, which is less than optimal, I was waiting for basically persistent value to expose cookies to get started on that.
Okay, but so persistent value, that is the cookie version of persistent value, is that correct? Which is not yet done, is that correct?
As far as I know, not.
Does somebody know that here? Do we have whoever is project managing that here?
I don't know who is the PM for ask.
Okay, look.
Not for ask, for persistent value.
Yes. Right. In these meetings, we really need the project managers for these things here.
Yeah, but that's a related project manager. It's not directly.
No, I understand. Fair enough. So, oh gosh, somebody should. I think Roman is the person who's working on this. Is that not correct?
Yeah, it's Roman.
Or is it Joel who's working on the web session stuff?
think it was mostly Roman.
Okay, could somebody,
Joel
Eric,
might
could you
know
try
about
and
it.
see whether you can find Roman?
Yes.
Okay, but so, I mean, to my mind, it's a little disappointing that Ask hasn't had more usage. Do you have a sense of why that is? I mean, is it doing the right thing?
I think that there are two problems with Ask. One is that it's somewhat clunky in that, you go step by step, so things tend to become very long. So
Yeah,
if you
but
have
there's
a lot
no
of
choice.
questions to ask, yeah.
There's no choice. That's what you have.
Yeah, and so people tend to redesign their forms so that they don't need it, because in the end it takes longer to reload the page to do each question once than to basically ignore.
I'm sorry. Why are you saying that? Because of some implementation issue?
No. I'm just saying that if you have if you have to reload the page every time you have a new question and so on, like
what the heck is that?
Yeah.
What the heck is that?
No, you're on prototype, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the work I'm doing on interpreter.
Okay. Okay. All right. So again, if we can't get hold of Roman right now, let's just move on. I agree with leaving this stuff experimental. Okay, but what I want to do is get the roadmap for how we're getting conversation page and conversation API implemented, and that might not be you.
Totally fine.
I wonder if that's something Igor could take a look at, Backsheet could take a look at. That's a possibility. And which group is that going to be covered by?
I mean, I think that there's an important part of this which requires some web knowledge, or at least knowledge of the way generated HTTP response works.
I see.
So the way we internally code active cloud objects.
Okay. Okay. Well, so that needs okay. Let's understand where is this going to be managed. Okay. So
I think Matt K or Dominic would be a good person to project manage this.
Okay, so then we better bring this up in the cloud development meeting. Okay, who's going to make sure that happens?
I'll follow up.
Okay, Raj, you need to make sure that there are project managers in these meetings. Okay,
I'll try to figure out who does what, and
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's what we need. Okay, so that's it for Ask. I assume we're not getting Roman. Let's move on. Okay, what is this?
So the issue with form control is that there's a disconnect between the thing you type and the thing that it turns into, the thing that it interprets as. This input field has only a single state. Think about control equal, where you have the query cleanly separated from the thing that the query parses to.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that in form control.
Why was form control introduced? It was introduced as a wrapper to be able to exhibit the automation that exists in the decision of what control to bring up for a given input. Is that correct? For a given input field. Is that correct?
I think
can you speak to that, please?
I think so. I mean, I think that one of the ideas was that there was no form-like thing that it could use in a manipulate. And so if you wanted to have a field that smartly interpreted a country to display like a map.
Okay, so that's different from what, okay.
Yeah. And I've been arguing for a bit that there is a tighter way to integrate things between the control word and the forms interpreter word. And that would be like, if you think about it, like input field takes a second argument, which is a domain.
Yes. What is this? This seems, does anybody use this? What is it? I really don't understand what this is doing.
I don't know of anyone who uses it.
When was it introduced and why? Okay, what is it supposed to do?
I think, as Carlos said, it's a way. It was supposed to give us the ability to access form controls, a single control out of a form, in a manipulate, bound to a dynamic variable in some way.
I see.
But I think it was not ambitious enough. Like, if I could just say input field of dynamic of X, comma, restricted country Europe, I think it would be a lot more powerful. And then,
but that still doesn't separate the query from the payload.
Well, that's not a problem, because input field can contain anything within it. And so basically, after I type Italy, after the string Italy is interpreted, that turns into the orange blob, and the orange blob in the field. And then at that point, interpreter is idempotent.
I mean, some input fields can contain anything, and certainly we could architect
we can say
anything. Yeah,
we can say that the ones that have an interpreter type, if the object passes.
But an input field is not the only type of thing that a form, even in its default action, can put up. Like, for example, it can, if it's an image, you can have something which is a drag, receiver.
Only on the web. On the front end, it still is a file name setter. It's just that we fancied up the file name setter on the web. But it the symbolic specification.
But again, let's go through this again. So this is, let me just try to make a version of this that isn't completely crazy. I mean, so the structure here, let's say, could be country. Is that right? So you're saying
no, because it's one level above. So you get an association out. You can interpret multiple fields at once. So you would say manipulate, then you have to put X somewhere.
I have an X there.
No. I mean, in the list, like first argument of the list is X, and then you say.
Oh, I see. So then, but what is it? Quotes X? That's really funky. What the heck is that?
No, that's not what I meant. I mean, in manipulate, you can put in the second argument of manipulate, you can put variable, comma, domain.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then choose the control.
So what are you saying here? So I'm saying I have a variable, and then what's the domain here?
I don't remember. What about Lou? Do you have
what am I supposed to do here for form control?
Yeah, I'm trying to dust off an example. I'll send you when I do.
So far, this function is crashing and burning. In other words, put straightforwardly, the experiment of it has failed.
I would agree with that.
Since none of us can even really remember exactly what we're supposed to do.
I mean, again, I would really want to extend merge the control language with the interpreter language. It would make so many things so much better.
Another benefit of doing what Carlos suggests with input field is that we don't run into issues where where we need to separate the query from the payload, which is the issues that are linked from this notebook.
Okay, but so manipulate X, comma X. Why doesn't that have? How do you get an input field here?
List X. Or X, comma, control type input field, or X, comma, value.
Okay. So that's a regular input field, and it does what it should do. Okay, or I can say control type arrow input field. Right, fine.
Inside the braces.
That would help. Okay, so you're proposing that in the future, I mean, right now, if I say manipulate X, comma, like country here, obviously it won't do what we want, but what does it in fact do? Let's see what it does. Oh, I see. It defaults. That's really wild. It defaults, the input there defaults to, it's an input field.
With an initial value. So put that X in another set of braces so that you're being clear that you're not giving an initial value, you're giving a specification. Yeah, and close the brace. Then that will error out because country is not a valid domain.
To specify, I see. But it could be in the sense that we could decide that the things which are supported in forms could be supported in that syntax there also.
We could do, and we would need to decide what the value assigned to X would be, because in the controls world, of course, it gets an association.
Right, but in this world, it should be an input field thing, which doesn't get an association.
In this world, it could just be a value.
That's what I think, yes. And I think it's right that what we should do is make input field, which right now has certain types that it supports, right?
Yep, it has a small handful.
Right. But those could perfectly well be, that second argument could perfectly well be a spec, a full form type spec.
Maybe with the interpreter wraparound, like interpreter country.
It's possible. Maybe without. I think it would be nice as a courtesy, as a syntactic courtesy, it would be nice to not have to put that wrapper.
Yeah, but if you put it, you also gain the second and third argument and the options of interpreter, so it's not
fair enough. Okay, well, so who would get
that should go to Parth for tracking, and it'll be a combination of myself for the top level stuff and someone like John or Ian for the, or possibly Aaron for the back end, for the friend support.
Okay.
And Carlo for consulting.
I want to say that this it's not just input field. Like, for example, you could have file name setter and slider take interpreter specs. So slider of restricted integer from 0 to 10 should work as 0, 10, 1.
Okay. I think you're describing this to the wrong person. I think you should describe it to Parth and he should write it up. Okay. Okay. Good. All right. Let's go on. So is that it for Carlo here?
Let me quickly double check. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Carlo. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Stephen, Itai is on vacation, so he's not here.
Okay. So why do you think Iconize is not ready for prime time?
I think it is. I'm not sure why it was ever experimental to begin with.
Okay, I think the graphic design of it is not adequate, though. People have been complaining about that. Let's discuss that a bit.
And we already have tasked Billy with improving that. I don't know where he is on that work, but if he hasn't done it already, it's on his list.
Okay, can somebody see if they can find Billy and see what he has something to say about that right now?
Yeah, we'll do.
But as far as the implementation, it's solid. There's no reason for it to be experimental, in my opinion.
Okay. And what about cloud support?
The only thing one can't do on cloud is interactively iconize a thing via the mouse.
Yes, which we're hoping we will be able to do.
Right. But that would involve people not in this meeting.
Okay. So again, that's probably a Matt K thing to take up. But I agree, there's no reason to keep Iconize experimental. All right, let's just see this graphic design thing. Why was it still tagged as experimental here? Why does it still say under active development? Raj, can you describe that, please?
I'll see who gave the comments. I think that was Itai.
You know what? Can I make the suggestion that you always make sure these comments are signed?
Sure.
Okay.
That's Itai, though. I just checked. Those were Itai's comments.
Okay, but so, Lou, that's not the case that you're currently putting things in. We don't know what the date of this comment was either.
Well, we're putting it, for instance, into the edit menu. We're making it a toggle rather than a one-way street for the interaction. But that has nothing to do with Iconize it as a function. Yep, Iconize as a function is solid.
Okay. Again, let's try and get Billy. Okay. What is this? Summary box data size limit.
This we shouldn't discuss without Itai. This is the threshold beyond which summary boxes automatically decide to not include everything, not include the full.
Yeah, this is a really nice feature. I mean, it's really great that it's working there. I mean, the fact that this control for it is still experimental, I don't think is terribly important. Okay, did we find Billy or not? Okay, we're going to move on to the next item here, typesetting. What on earth is this? That has nothing to do with typesetting. What the heck is this? This is something to do with the channel framework.
Yes, indeed. It is the only client for this function right now.
But it is knitted under typesetting. That's why I called it typesetting.
What the heck is it?
Disable formatting. It's a function that prevents evaluation, for example, inside hold complete when it's delivered via a message into the channel broker client.
It's an incredibly general name for something whose description is that specific.
Well, it is made very general. You can use it anywhere. The idea is...
So if I say disable formatting and I say something like 1 over x, that doesn't look very disabled to me. What's disabled about that?
Because disable formatting works only inside hold functions.
It has the wrong name then.
Well, it has some, it may be a very well wrong name, but the idea is that it disables only held expressions. And the idea is that hold does not prevent typesetting. You understand?
Why isn't that an option? Why isn't this an option to hold? Because hold is Verogs, among other things.
Okay, yeah, good point.
This is a really weird thing. So this is part of, so hold complete also doesn't disable formatting. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, it is correct.
Okay, but this name, disable formatting, if it applies only inside hold, is a nuts name.
It's inside hold and inside hold complete and inside right-hand side of rule delayed. Everything that is held can benefit from this.
This is a crazy thing.
Yeah, but isn't it better to have like an head that says that? Oh no, you cannot do it with an head, right?
What do you mean?
If you have an head that is all and you say disable formatting. Yeah, sorry. I think the head is enough. Why you will need an option?
No. Ricardo, the whole point is I'm objecting to a thing called disable formatting that is this very specific thing that only works inside held functions.
Okay.
I mean, it works inside any held.
Right.
You can think of it like an input form wrapper that is only active inside of held expressions.
Yes. It's really a weird thing.
And which evaporates immediately when unheld, when allowed to evaluate.
Why on earth did we call it disable formatting without any reference to held?
I don't know. Itai needs to be here for this.
Who was involved in building this?
Itai.
Igor, can you give any more detail? You were the one who initiated this, or not?
Yes, most definitely. Disabled held formatting or something, inserting hold into this name sounds good to me.
Yeah, but it's still a very obscure concept. I mean, this is basically saying inside of hold, this is only relevant, but it does not affect the semantics. So if I say disable held formatting here, and then I say, let me do this. If I say, okay, dandy. Now I say release hold. So the release hold
removes
removes disable formatting.
Yes.
Does disable formatting break off of its own accord? Yes, it does.
Yes, the release held allows disable formatting to evaluate, and by evaluating, it removes itself.
But does it do anything in this case? It only does something if it's inside a held expression.
Yes.
Correct.
I don't like disable held formatting because the held is like an adjective that qualifies the formatting, which is not the correct thing.
Yes.
What really is this?
This is a hack, if you want, to prevent front end from kicking in when a held expression is displayed, and prevent any possible issues with dynamic be fired within held expression and so on.
Yes, I understand what it's for. I mean, it's a hold complete type thing.
Yes.
It is a shame it can't be an option to hold, but I think it can't be. And your point is that it's also something that occurs in what about
interesting idea.
I don't know if that really works well, but disable doesn't seem right either, because disable suggests that it's a sticky thing, like set, for example. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this would suggest that on its own it would hold without formatting. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas that's not in fact the case. This is just
disable formatting when held.
Yeah, right. I'm not seeing what to do here. But I don't think disable is the right thing.
I mean, it's input form, right? You're disabling the standard form typesetting or the traditional form typesetting. You're still getting input form typeset, or if you want to call it typesetting, input form formatting.
Yes. How on earth to say that?
Hold unformatted.
I mean, maybe one could imagine something where there's an expression and there's a form here, because you might, I mean, then you could do full form if you wanted to. Held formatting seems a little bit more sensible in terms of the meaning here.
Yeah, I kind of like it. Let's think about it.
Someone on our live stream is suggesting hold without formatting is an alias for hold with auto-disabled formatting on. The problem with that is that we want many different places, like, for example, a : greater than, because this, if I'm not mistaken, would right now do the right thing, right?
Yes.
If I say that, it will do this. Whereas if I just say this, it will rather correctly do that.
Yes.
So we really need something which is its own wrapper. The question is, if somebody sees that
maybe
in a piece of code, would they have any idea what it does? A : greater than held formatting of a half. It's pretty weird.
How about disabled formatting?
I don't think so. That sounds like it's some kind of, wheelchair access formatting.
Okay.
The
Maybe a pattern as a second argument that allows you to specify, what to format and what not to format.
That's a bit scary because it's going to involve evaluation then, which is what we're trying to avoid. The whole point is to prevent evaluation leaks that come from, evaluation through formatting.
It's a pattern, yes, of course. If you're using question mark something, then yes. But if it's just a pure pattern,
yeah, but I'm not sure we're asking. I mean, I'm not sure we need to enhance. Okay, this may have been a bad suggestion on my part because other than full form, I can't really see why that would be important. The pattern case. Okay, so I'm sorry. Let's walk through this again. So what this is doing. See, what will the actual words be here? Right now it says disables the formatting when it appears inside a held expression. What would we actually say here? And what about a form type thing? Just like we say input form. So the reason we don't want held of input form is because it will stick around, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, because we want something which is when we release the hold, it will evaporate automatically, whereas that one does not.
Mm-hmm.
That is ridiculous, unfortunately, because it doesn't make it clear that the form is going to disappear when the thing is evaluated. That's an interesting suggestion from someone on the live stream. Hold format. Let's remind ourselves what the various different, right now we have hold form, which, boy, what a complicated thing. Okay, so hold form means I could say something like 1 + 1 here, and it will not evaluate. This is, boy, this is a complicated concept. So this is when held, let's write down what it is. When held, use input form for formatting, which is a different statement from do no formatting.
Mm-hmm.
But
and when not held, evaporate.
Yes. And
Perhaps
the reason...
Call it hold input form?
No, because the problem with that is that it's then a form, and forms don't evaporate. I mean, the semantics of it evaporating is, of course, kind of weird. Let's just ask the question. If hold, I see that an option for hold doesn't cut it because it doesn't solve this problem here. I mean, the full version of this would be something like without formatting when held. But it's not when held, because as soon as it isn't held, this wrapper evaporates. Right?
Mm-hmm.
What's another example of a wrapper which evaporates when... Is there another formatting wrapper that evaporates when the thing is not held?
Defer evaporates on typesetting. That's not quite the same thing.
Let's look at defer for a second. So defer 1 + 1.
So that output contains no reference to defer. It's clean expert.
Right. But the point about that output is I can now copy it, if I'm not mistaken, and then evaluate it, correct?
Yes.
And that's its primary functionality. So what does this actually do? So this is saying, yeah, that's a little different. Yeah. Unevaluated is obviously doing something yet different. What about is that crazy? What is the analogy between this and unevaluated? I mean, that will now, wait a minute, why does that do that? I thought unevaluated, why does unevaluated stick around in that case? Why doesn't it evaporate there? Oh, I see. No, that just seems wrong. Why does it do that? Works by effectively temporarily setting attributes so that f holds its argument unevaluated, then evaluates f of expa. So why would it have unevaluated stick around there? Do you understand what I'm asking? On the live stream, it only evaluates if the function surrounding it is called. Okay, but I see. If, in other words, if I'd said f of x blank colon equals x, and then I said f of unevaluated 1 + 1, then I would get 2. Okay, is this then the analogy? Is the analogy unformatted?
I had earlier suggested hold unformatted just to make it clear that it is.
No, but is the analogy to unevaluated? So what unevaluated does is it effectively temporarily sets the attributes so that it won't be evaluated. What this is doing is it's sort of temporarily putting an input form around it.
That's right.
I mean, this would be, see, this is crazy. Something like that is crazy.
Well, hold unformatted is simpler.
Yeah, but what does it mean? Write the words that it would say. So,
well, in a sense, unformatted and unevaluated work in the opposite directions. Because unevaluated adds hold attribute, and the current disable formatting does not add anything but disappears when it's not held. So it's not exactly parallel concept.
well, wait a minute. Wait, okay. What do you think this sentence should say? No, I'm sorry. That's the wrong. I'm looking at the wrong function. It's a form that disables the formatting of expa when it appears inside held expressions. Well, it's not a form. That's an incorrect statement. It's not a form in the sense of input form.
That's why it's not on the name. Yeah, but I see your point.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so boy. What's really confusing about this is how it evaporates when it is not held anymore. Which is the correct behavior.
It is certainly a useful behavior.
Okay, any further ideas on this? I think disable formatting is just wrong.
Could be.
And it would be really good to have some way of indicating that this thing is going to disappear if it's no longer held. I mean, this is the correct name, Bob. I mean, this is the correct sentiment. But why does that doesn't suggest that it will evaporate if it's no longer held? Ugh. Someone is asking, how do you name the result if it is unformatted? Yes, it's usually called input form. The problem with input form, that means it is displayed in input form, but the actual input form wrapper doesn't disappear. If I just do that, oh, it does disappear because it does disappear with %, but that's a confusing thing. That's for a different reason. Wait a minute, why did that not? I mean, this is the prototype build. Why did that not display? Lou, why does that not?
You're looking at the cell label?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's got to be I'll chat with Tom about
bug.
that. He's got some new cell label-y things in the prototype build, and maybe he doesn't have that case fully finished yet.
Yeah, that's a bug.
I'll chat with
Because normally it would say / input form there.
Yep.
All right, we're a little stuck on this. Let's return to the previous. Did we manage to find Billy for the discussion about iconize?
Eric mentioned that he was apparently at a doctor's appointment.
Okay. Okay, someone on the live stream mentioned a point about iconize that is something we should discuss. They mentioned that Ethan Black 86 mentions that iconized large expressions cause notebooks to hang when opened. That's an interesting claim and not a very surprising claim. I mean, in other words, if you've got a huge pile of data in your iconize, what's going to happen? Now, in the cloud, okay, Lou, can you comment on that for the desktop?
Well, so the interpretation box that Iconize uses does need to store all of the data. So the front end does need to at least scan through it. It doesn't need to scan it too carefully, and it's possible that it's doing more work than it strictly needs to do.
Well, let's find out what I mean, if we were to do, for example, let's see, how can we do an easy test? Let's say we do, we just say, I mean, we can obviously do this test easily enough, but just as a sense, if we say iconize range of 10 to the 7. Okay, lovely and quick. Okay, now let's save that notebook someplace. And let me see where I'm going to save this here. Let's go. Okay. Oh, what's it doing here? Well, first of all, it's taking forever. Look at this. This is
right. I think the counter that's implemented in the status area goes cell by cell. This is not a case that's particularly handled well.
So that should be fixed.
I'll make a note for John.
Okay, that's first thing. Okay, so second point here, let's find out. Okay, so where is this? This is our first notebook there. So, I mean, this thing should be pretty big. Oops, that doesn't work. I guess we have to have, how do we get the notebook file name?
I think it's notebook file name.
So sorry, I was muted. Yes, notebook file name.
Okay. So let's see, file byte count. 18 megabytes. Okay, fine. All right, so now, let's see, we're going to close this. And I have to go hunting through my file system here. Okay, here goes. Oops. Well, that wasn't particularly shabby, although the thing didn't show up. I mean, it just didn't appear. If I'm making sense, right?
I don't understand.
Well, I just went double click, and nothing's happening. Okay, and then suddenly it appears. So I wonder what would happen if I were to have a bunch of content here. Ahead of that large cell.
So much so that the lazy loading would ignore it in the first round.
Well, I don't know, how much do I need? So this is clearly wrong. What's happening here, and the fact that the thing.
Yeah, this is the same issue that I'll chat with John about.
Okay. Let's try it again here. Okay, so that loaded immediately. Okay, so now something interesting is going to happen. Okay, so now I'm going to scroll down. Oh, we froze. Okay, now it came in. So that freeze was fairly unfortunate. Am I making sense?
Right, especially because the display of this is so simple. It's just the back end that's complicated. So if you were to copy it, or if you're to evaluate it, you do need the full interpretation box content. But just to display it, you don't.
Okay, so I just did a copy. I'm going to paste it into another notebook. Ooh, wow, what's that? Oh my gosh, I'm spinning here, probably because the copy is doing something. What is the copy to clipboard doing here?
That I can't answer.
Okay, so that's another issue that we have to look at. Okay, so now the paste was immediate. Makes sense?
So the penalty was paid on copy.
Somehow, right? And if I say / length, 10 million, I'm happy. That was all immediate. So for some reason on copy here, there was some clipboard conversion done. So if I now do another paste, yeah, it's happy. Now, let's just be outrageous here. Let's do that copy. This could be really bad. Oh my gosh, my mouse is dead.
Well, again, you're paying the penalty on copy, and it's going
to be. Yeah, but am I paying the penalty 5 times, 6 times on copy?
Well, you have 6 different objects here. The front end most likely didn't remember that they all came from the same.
Yeah, and then there's no reason for it to do that. That's a silly optimization, probably.
Yeah.
Because who would want the same exact thing? Well, actually, that's not completely clear. That's a question. Is it worth hashing these things to find out if somebody? Because I can imagine a case where somebody wants the exact same piece of data multiple times in their notebook. See what I'm saying? You know, they want the plot of this plot of it and that plot of it, and they don't want to explicitly name it. They just want it to be there. Okay, well, this is not a happy thing. What's going on here? It's just spinning. It's not telling me what's happening. Yeah, this is a case. I don't think we've tested this well.
So what would you want to have happen here? Would a dialogue saying "copy in progress" be sufficient with some kind of progress?
Same thing that we have in the
formatting notebook contents. Oh,
where we actually describe the copy as being, you know, a thing in progress type thing. Okay, finally copied. Okay, so now here it's gonna come in instantaneously. Now if I do a save, it's probably going to take a while. Oh, checking 0%. Now what the heck is it doing?
All right, so this is the cell by cell thing that I was mentioning before. Now that you have multiple cells.
Now it's multiple cells, it will at least say which cell it's dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to take forever because it's all right, so we've identified an issue here. So the other thing with iconize is to look at the reformatting of iconize. So I think the expectation is that this will be unexperimentalized for 12, but that we still have a little more work to do in terms of smoothing this issue and in terms of
the graphic design.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Okay, let's go back for a second. Now that we've had a little break, let's go back and readdress the horror of without formatting or whatever it's going to be called. And what did I do with that notebook? Oh boy, oh wow. And now it's still saving. Oh, big time waste here. Because now it did the validation. Again, please don't forget to at least discuss the possibility of hashing these things so that multiple identical ones are dealt with immediately.
I'll bring it up.
Okay. I'm not quite sure where my other notebook got to. And of course, this is uninterruptible, which is unfortunate. Okay. Let's go back to the disable formatting or whatever it's called, or held without formatting. Something vanishing form. Yeah, the word vanish is never my favorite. It somehow speaks of magic that, and I think as soon as one says, yeah, vanishing form, that's, I don't know, language design hackery starts flashing, but it is not an unreasonable.
I know Robbie has had some utilities with evaporative as a modifier.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, that sounds like better for some kind of, I don't know, solar salt farms or something.
Dissolving.
Horrifying. I mean, it's just too weird. Okay. All right. So we have not solved this problem here.
Nope.
I think our least held unformatted. That's horrible because it suggests that unformatted when held. I mean, that's what it actually is, input form when held. By the way, is input form guaranteed to not evaluate anything? Doesn't input form still evaluate dynamics?
It doesn't evaluate dynamics. It does allow some things to format, like I think sequence form and colon form and other ancient things.
But so is that adequate for Igor's use case of really not formatting anything? I mean, because the issue is it guaranteed that input form will never evaluate? Is it documented that input form will never do an evaluation? This feels like a security problem to me.
Yes, it is.
But Igor, as I recall, you specifically wanted input form here and not full form because you wanted the expressions to be more human readable.
Right, but then this means we've got to tighten up the promise of what input form is going to be doing, and whether in fact, if we're going to use this for something in the chat framework, we've got to make sure that it doesn't, that input form, you know, in 3 years, somebody doesn't say, oh, we've just got to add this thing that does a little tiny bit of evaluation to input form, right? And we've got to actually put tests in, Raj, that would be for you, that confirm that no evaluation is happening in input form.
Right.
Look, I think input form when held is the least horrifying of the names I've seen.
The word form is still there, so it implies that it sticks, no?
It says when held.
Okay, okay.
I mean, it's kind of clunky, but this is a clunky concept. So displays expa in input form when it appears as part of a held expression, as a held expression. I think that's explainable. All right, that is my provisional suggestion, input form when held. Okay. So who's dealing with this function? Is that Itai, or who dealt with it?
It is Itai, yeah.
Okay.
I'll relate to him.
Okay, fine. That's my suggestion, and let me give you those 2 lines there. I'm not going to save this whole notebook here. Let's see.
So the idea is that the function would work the same and just being renamed.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay.
What do people think of this name?
I mean, we don't really use the participle form in function names a lot. Held. You know, we used to have 2 held expression, but not anymore.
No, we don't. I mean, this is a messy form. Yeah. An unpronounceable participant on our live stream is pointing out the concept of how to input stuff raw is becoming weirdly defined with control equals on input, evaluate in place, etc. Yeah, it's complicated. And I'm not fully happy with this, and I think giving it a bizarre and encrusted name like this for a somewhat bizarre function is probably the right thing. All right, provisionally, that's what I'm suggesting. We'll probably have to talk about this again. Let us continue on to the channel framework, horror though that is. You know what? I would like to talk about the chat stuff before we talk about the channel framework, because it's our main use case.
Okay. I mean, obviously, it relies on the channel framework. So, you know, I'm suggesting that all this stuff stays experimental because not only are we, you know, still developing features for chat, that you know, we're also staring down the possibility of this MQTT server setup that may or may not affect how these existing functions need to be designed.
What do you mean design? Why would it make any difference when if there's a if there's an MQTT server instead of the Node.js server?
I mean, I don't know all of the details of what the MQTT server would bring us. If it's the case that the Wolfram language interaction with the server is the same, then that shouldn't be a concern.
Okay.
I don't know that.
Okay. So who am I going to add here just to do a little chat? Let's add Igor.
Let me
there
make
you
sure
go.
it's set up.
Okay. So yeah, but that's crazy that you have to have set it up before it starts.
Well, I need to make sure I'm signed in as me. That's what I meant. Because you're going to send it to Brian V, and I don't know if I am.
Okay.
I may not be, but you can try it. I mean,
well, so I'm setting it as text. Oh, for goodness sake. Okay, what is that? Igor, what is that?
I am trying to start my chat. It is not enabled. Let me see.
Some kind of complete garbage again.
I have no idea. I have never seen anything like that.
Yeah, well, Raj, can you comment on this?
I'm just double checking on master.
Okay.
Okay, I reproduce it on master. I will look into it. I don't know about this.
Again. You know, we really have to get this functionality actually working properly.
I mean, we do have a Packlet that's in QA testing right now, and they've run across a couple minor bugs, but they did get working. So, you know, it's a shame that it always seems to fall over. And
yeah, it always fails.
At it,
so let's take a look. I mean, just to understand, for 12, for chat, this whole business about how you can't add people to an existing chat session
is being fixed and will be fixed before version 12. That's in the Packlet that's in testing right now.
Okay.
And Stephen, it is working in 11.3. So whatever the bug is seems to be.
So somebody, 12. Okay, so it's failing in the master branch, it's failing in the prototype branch, but you claim, and I'm going to try it because I don't necessarily believe you, that it's working in the 11.3 production build.
It is. I just tested it. So.
Okay, so if I go here, by the way, is it sharing preferences between these things? So if I go new chat here, boom, boom. Boom. Okay, why did it do that little conniption where it resized that window?
Because this is actually the same window that you were inviting people from. It doesn't make a new window, you're in that same notebook. So it's resizing, or it has to flash a window, and resizing seems less hostile than flashing.
Okay.
No messages.
No messages, that's a good sign. All right, so in the production version, it's, okay, fine. So let's try something more real here. Let's try, let's try something. Let's try this. Let's say range of, let's try sending something iconized. Why not? Send a little gift pack. No, that I need to do that as input, right? So how do I do input? How do I paste this as input?
Well, you can either it's a normal notebook. You could just make an input cell and paste in that.
But it's actually
pasting as an output cell because you just copied the whole cell, right? It doesn't.
I didn't copy the whole cell actually, but let me try sending that anyway. Okay. Okay. And it's still alive there.
Let me test.
Okay, so now here, why did it have a secondary cell here? That's wrong.
I wasn't what you were doing, but yes, the iconized thing did come through live.
Okay, but there was a secondary cell that got generated here, which doesn't seem right. And this, because I set this, see, I'm setting that to input. Why is it generating an?
Oh, it's set to make a new cell in case you had something. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Why does it have an XXX there?
It's a prompt probably for you to enter stuff. It's selected.
I don't like it. I don't like it. Where did that come from? I mean, why would XXX be the prompt?
I mean, we'll just make it an empty cell. That's just how it's
have a prompt.
Yeah,
it does have a prompt, which I have to select. But when you press new cell, the cell opens with some kind of weird stuff in it. Is that right?
You mean when you click one of those buttons?
Yes. Because normally it didn't have any weird stuff on. I was just running it here. Okay, well, anyways, for some reason it has weird stuff there. Okay, so if I say manipulate, let's say, x squared, x 0, 21, something like this. Okay, I get a manipulate in here. And now I want to delete the manipulate there. Well, actually, I'm going to reverse close it. See what happens if I do this. Now I'm going to send that to you. Oy, it opened the reverse close. Why did it do that? And is it still
It's
alive?
probably just not even handled in there. Yeah, it's still live for mine. I can
Okay.
manipulate.
But so it's supposed to be, I mean, if I did multiple cells, is there a good reason? So here, if I go like this, and then I say, whatever it is, there, and now I press send. Magnificent. So that sent that to you as a multicellular organism, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, you'll notice that it did do things with the margins that is just kind of, it's maybe a little unfortunate, but we...
and it lost the in-out prompts.
Well, the in-out prompts are selectable. You can toggle those on, and that's under the menu in the upper right.
So you mean to leave them? But wait a minute. But with the genericized in-out prompts that don't have numbers, why aren't we sending those? That seems like we should be sending those. I think we didn't send those because we didn't have genericized prompts.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. You're right. We did not have them when we were doing this.
Okay, so I think that should be the default setting, is to send the genericized prompts. Right? It's a little weird to send your actual prompts.
And that was why we turned them off. Yeah.
Right. So I think we should be sending genericized prompts.
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. So let's go back here to what this is. Okay. So these are copy channel UUID. Okay. What's chat settings? That's my chat settings.
That's right.
Is that really what we would want to call that menu item? Just chat settings? Because it suggests it's the chat. It's for this particular chat.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's, because you can access that from the window menu, the product level window menu as well. And that's what it's called.
Product level window menu here.
Yep. It's the fifth thing down there.
I see it. Boy, that's hard to understand out of context. I mean, especially since the word chat can also be a verb. And also the fact that settings, it's not where I expect to find settings. Right? If I'm going to find settings, I would find them over by the preferences menu.
Right, which changes around on platform, from platform to platform. I mean, on Windows.
Why on earth are chat settings not just in preferences?
As a separate tab? I mean, they certainly could be. This is just, it's kind of an experimental thing, and the preferences menu is set in stone. We were just trying to keep a lower profile, lower footprint in changing.
Well, except that it's right at the top level of a main menu now.
Well, but it's not messing up the preferences dialog, so to speak.
I think that's a lame argument, if I might say so. I mean, the preferences dialog needs some updating anyway. I think it should just be a chat. It should just be a tab here.
I mean, we already have something is in there for chat, and it's under services. It's the turn on and off chat at the top level.
Okay, but I think this should be called chat preferences, and it should go in the preferences dialog. I mean, if you say chat preferences, I think it's more obvious. Excuse me, more obvious that it's not settings for this particular chat session, but is a general preferences thing. Do you agree or not?
Generally, I agree, but I mean, even when you go to it from inside of a chat, you see things like screen name, and you might think that you're setting your screen name for just this chat, but you're not. So it's...
No, but okay, but that's when you go into those preferences, if it's in part of the preferences dialog, then you kind of know that it's a global thing.
Oh, so well, right. You're saying when you selected it from chat settings that it would open up the preferences dialog and navigate to that place in the preferences dialog where you were changing it. Yes, I agree.
You know what? If you it doesn't. No, this is fine. What it's doing here is perfectly nice. If it says chat preferences, I think that will be fine.
Maybe global chat preferences.
How global would you want it to be? I mean, in other words, is it
It's not syncing to the cloud or anything. It could, and we talked about it, but it's not currently. So it's not global in that sense.
Right. Well, I mean, we could indicate that by indicating the scope here
Desktop.
should sync to the cloud. What we can indicate essentially the persistence location in here, which would then make it clear how global it actually is. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I think it should use persistent value with a global, defaultly. I mean, I thought this was going to be in the, in the cloud, right? Which I don't think this is yet working in the cloud, is it?
It is not.
And what's the status of that?
We'd have to talk to cloud folks about it, but as far as I know, we're still waiting on Service Link.
Right, but that's in order to have, I see, because the mechanism we're using here is actually writing with notebook commands into
It's notebook write, basically, yeah. And
okay, but so right now, this would be, where are the preferences here? That's really weird. If I open a new notebook, what? That's crazy. That's crazy. What just happened there? The menu should be, you saw that? Hey, Raj, did you see that?
Sorry, no.
Okay, let's go back to it. Okay, in this state here, this page is changing, right? But in this state here, there's a very short menu here, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I go into an actual thing, there's a big long menu which includes preferences.
Right.
Okay. And that's where this should be. And by the way, we need to probably unify the preferences that we are seeing there with the desktop preferences. That's probably going to need to be a session to go over, and somebody should prep that. I think that's something probably for between Parth and Matt K.
Okay, I'll let them know.
Okay. All right. So, oops. Okay. So when you say create chat here, what does create chat do?
You might not actually find it in product. I think you might. Oh no, it is there. Never mind. Great.
But it's in some weird subcontext here.
It is, and that's because it was not fully. I mean, these are all very simple implementations. They're not doing a whole lot. You can create chat. First of all, you have to load Chat Tools package to do it in the.
Why was this even discussed as a de-experimentalization item? Because this is not a system context thing.
It should be, though. If this stuff was actually fully fleshed out, the fact that it was living in a context is really just a temporary. We wanted to get
right. We were discussing having a design meeting about programmatic chat stuff, right?
Exactly.
And is this all the functions we need, or do we need tons of functions, don't we?
Yeah, and there's another one that there's functionality for that isn't even on this list because it's not documented yet, like listing your chat rooms. The chat rooms that you own,
or sending a message to a particular chat room,
right? And that stuff is all not implemented yet, though.
And also providing a bot for a chat room, right?
Sure.
Do we know how to do that at this point?
I mean,
that's essentially an API function that's called from the when you send that, and that relates also to our ask discussion from earlier. It should be the case that a bot can see everything that happened in the chat session and can then decide what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it would. I mean, back when we were first messing around with chat stuff, I wrote a little bot that was, basically it looked for a string pattern that was sent to it, or that you sent to the channel. If you asked the bot for something, it would, what it did is it did some Wolfram Alpha lookup on it.
Yep.
And that's, I mean, at its core, all a bot is something listening that's looking for specific patterns.
Yes, I understand. But what's the interface? I mean, in other words, for a given chat, you have to associate a bot with it. Right. Yeah. So it's essentially a deployment into that channel. Igor, have you thought this through?
No.
Okay. Who, if anybody, has thought any of this through?
So, I mean, it could be, if we had a chat object, which is, basically a wrapper around channel object. I don't think bots necessarily need to be designed at the channel framework level. I mean, they could be, I guess, but
how would it work? Okay.
So if you have, okay, let's say that you had a Wolfram Alpha bot. It's just something that we pre-deployed for people to use.
Yes.
That would be some, it doesn't matter how it's.
But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is user deployable bots.
Well, okay, fine. You're deploying it as a cloud object. It's either an API function, something. You have some cloud object. And then...
Let me point out, by the way, that the bot, in the current architecture, I guess, the only disembodied computation that can run is in the cloud. That is, you couldn't have a local bot server.
I'd have to think about that. I'm not sure.
Well,
unless you are sure.
You can, but it will go down when your session goes down.
Yes, I understand.
If you had
Go ahead.
If you had a computer or if you had a machine that would be able to listen to things, like if you could, pass it some special message over a channel to tell it to listen to another channel, it could be local. I don't know why it couldn't be. But with the same...
Well, it's got to be a daemon or a server of some kind. But it's possible that initially we would only support such things in the cloud.
That would be easiest, I think.
But then what does it look like? So you've deployed something to the cloud, and now somehow that cloud, I don't know if it's an API or whatever, has to be connected into this chat session. Right? So something has to tell it, this chat session.
I think that you would probably add it just like a participant. I think you just add it, but it would be, under the hood, it would be specially, the chat tools would know that, okay, this is a bot, so I need to look for and send a special message or, evaluate this API function in this certain way that it knows to start listening to this chat.
Yeah.
It might just be as simple as just passing it the UUID for the channel. And then it just starts listening to it, and it knows that when it gets something.
But we don't have that functionality in the cloud right now until we have triggered task, right? Triggered task will trigger from a channel. Is that correct? Or Igor, is there a mechanism in the channel framework, or would this be a channel listener? Well, how would this work?
Well, if it's an API function, it does not have any persistence in the sense that it does not remember all previous messages and so on. If it's a desktop session, then channel listen will maintain all this history. And in that sense, it's simpler for a bot to operate if the channel listener is deployed locally. Am I making sense?
Yes, but I don't understand the well, what you're saying there is that we don't have a good way to show the history. The ask functionality does have a way to show the history. What is the relationship between the ask functionality and chat?
I have never dealt with ask functionality. I need to look at it.
Isn't that my experience with ask? It's admittedly pretty basic too, but don't you basically have to define all of the different trees that you?
Yes, you do. But in other words, yeah. So it's a little different, but it's
you could envision a simple bot being defined using the ask functionality, though, using the ask framework.
Well, particularly if we have conversation API and conversation page, those are specifically things that look like the back end of automating this thing. But I'm still trying to understand, in the cloud, how do we connect to a particular channel? Igor, you understand my question? So in other words, if we have a channel that corresponds to a chat session, right, which is operating on a particular channel with particular UUID, and then
in an API function, channel listen does not make sense for now, because channel listen implies that there is a kernel which is to a message.
No, I get it, but triggered task is supposed to be triggerable on a channel, right? It's the analog of scheduled task, but it triggers when there is data received on a channel.
Yes.
Right, so that's the analog. It's not a great name, given that that's the analog of essentially a channel. What is it? I mean, it's a channel API function or something.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know anything about the trigger task thing, but how we would implement this now, I think, is under the hood, each one of these chat channels has a channel receiver function attached to it, and that channel receiver function right now, all it does is provides, for a chat room, it provides the stored messages. If you join a chat room that's already in progress, so but it does run an API to do that. We could, attach a bot API to that channel receiver function, which then when that channel receives something, it passes it along to this bot API.
Yeah, look, I mean, the fact is, it's very much like mail receiver function. If you deploy a mail receiver function, then what happens is you're given a mail handle, and anything that is sent to that mail handle is sent to the mail receiver function. So similarly, in this case, what we want is that anything that is sent to this chat is sent to some kind of chat receiver function.
Well, you can do it with the channel receiver function. It triggers a cloud object execution on each and every message sent to the channel.
Fine, but what is it in the cloud? The channel receiver function, is that operating in the cloud?
It executes basically a cloud object. So whatever cloud object can execute, it's done.
Okay, let's walk through this again. Okay, we start a chat.
Okay.
Maybe we start it with our friendly bot already in the chat. Or part way along, people say, oh, I really want to ask a bot that question. Let's add that bot. I think those are the two obvious scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in fact, the way a bot is going to look in the original thing where you're selecting users. Okay, so the next question is, does the bot have a Wolfram ID? Because that will be the analog of mail receiver function, which after all, you are. How does that work? Mail receiver function is a generic email address with one of those plus things to disambiguate which mail receiver function it's going to. Whereas in this case, okay, so one could imagine a similar thing for these bots, right? I mean, if I deploy a mail receiver function thing, if I say something like, let's go here. If I say, cloud deploy mail receiver function of, let's see, what can I say? I can say hash string reverse of hash subject, I think. And what should happen? Why is it taking so long? There we go. Okay, there it is, right? So if I then send mail to that receiver function, oh, it's not going to do anything very exciting, right? Because it's going to say, right, all this is going to do is it's going to, in the privacy of its own cloud, it's going to evaluate string reverse, which isn't going to do anything that I can see. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I said send mail of that, deploy that, then let's try here. Then I say hello there, and hopefully it will send me, let's see if that worked. Oh, very good. Magnificent. There it is. Okay. So let's understand the analogy of that for a bot, right? Because imagine that we did a chat receiver function here. And then what would happen is that we would get back, what would we get back? Some kind of fake Wolfram ID, right? Just like this is sort of a fake Wolfram ID. Am I making sense? And you could then add that Wolfram ID to your chat session, and just like the mail receiver function, it would allow you to interact with the thing. This makes sense to people?
Yeah. Now, can you name those mail receiver functions?
In what sense, name?
Well, the UMAP BG87. Can you the left-hand side?
No, I don't believe so at this time, because this has to be hooked in. This is to do with the whole service deploy business. This is hooking into a mail system, right? It's hooking into the mail system that operates in the cloud, and that receiver plus whatever is in the actual. Oh, excuse me. In the actual mail processor, that plus thing is getting stripped off and is getting used to determine which actual cloud object. There's then a table that's telling it which cloud object to use and so on.
Sure. Well, I mean, what I'm getting at is that if you're making these bots, presumably you'd want to be able to name them something.
Yes, you would like to name them. But we've got to have some notation then. I mean, maybe you name them as a cloud object in your, okay, so we got to figure out how to do that. We got to figure out how to add a okay, if it is something other than a Wolfram ID, how you add a non-Wolfram ID, in here, where you say view participants, right? Somewhere here, there would also be a bot.
Yeah, right.
Indicated somehow. Okay, look, I think we need a separate designer meeting about this about this chat stuff. We're now talking about the whole channel system. And the question is, this is all considered experimental at this time. And, I feel very unconfident of what we have here at this point. But I don't know, maybe Igor can convince me otherwise. I mean, I feel like it's really...
No, I don't want to convince you otherwise. My intention is to make it, to experimentalize when we have other protocols, except now we have only long polling. And I think that we must have at least WebSockets or MQTT or some other protocol.
What is this? This channel that exists here, what is this thing?
It's a channel object.
I can see that.
Yeah. So what's the question?
What is it? What does it have? What is chat invitations? It's
a channel object that is created in your name by the chat system. It's
yeah. Sorry, that's the when I say invite you to a chat.
Yeah, it's some kind of hailing frequency.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, and if I say channel base here, that will just be the channel broker.
Yes.
In the cloud.
Yes.
And somewhat obscurely, if I go to the channel broker, it's an HTTP channel broker, but if this was MQTT, would that look different?
It will have another IP address, but with regard to...
So right now, that just goes to this.
Yeah.
But really, sorry, go ahead.
The MQTT server must have an HTTP front end, because not every system in the world communicates on MQTT protocol. So, for example, if you want to get messages from Facebook or some other service which does not support MQTT, it has to have an HTTPS front end.
Okay. So it will look the same then. This front end will be the same, or will it say channelbroker.wolframcloud.com/MQTT or something?
Probably, yeah. Although we may eventually move it to that IP address and do some separation of labor.
Well, I don't understand. If the thing is being pointed to our publish subscribe channel broker, okay, it's got to have a definite. I mean, what our internal protocol is, you're saying many of the external services are just going to use HTTP.
Yes.
Okay, but then internally to us, we can be using MQTT, but then there is a translator somewhere that's brokering to HTTP, correct? Okay. Someone is asking, is there a way to get the channel broker pub subsystem working locally without the cloud?
Theoretically, yes. At the moment, we do not distribute our server, but we can do it at some point.
Is there any good reason we don't distribute the server?
No, it just requires a little bit of cleanup.
I mean, are we eventually going to just put the server on GitHub or something? I mean, is the server is a pretty generic channel brokering server, right?
Yes, yes.
Which
yes,
could be run on any device, whether it's a seriously, whether it has our engine or not.
Most definitely. The server does not use our engine per se. The server runs in whatever language you want it to run. Currently, it runs in Node.js, but it can run in Go. It can run in any other web language.
Right, and what it's doing is fairly trivial, right?
Well, it's a pub/sub mechanism. I would not call it trivial, but yes, it's fairly generic.
Right. Another question here from the live stream. Can we run the channel open function from a Wolfram session running in a server? Be helpful for IoT applications or any pub/sub application. What does that mean? So the channel open function.
There is no channel open function. There is create channel, channel listen, channel send. But what the user means by channel?
Well, I think they mean create channel.
Ah, okay, okay.
So create channel is running. That is creating a channel on the channel base, on that channel base, right? Okay, so what would that look like if that was a local server?
It will be a different HTTP address.
Why does it have an HTTP address at all? I mean, if you're on a local machine, there's no. So does the thing include a web server?
What thing?
Does the channel broker include a web server?
Well, of course, the channel broker runs in a web server which is implemented in Node. Yes. So it is a web server in a sense.
Okay, so what you're saying is, in order to run this locally, right? In order to run this on an arbitrary machine, you basically need you're setting up something which is effectively a web server.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Fine, but so if that was the case, then when you set up the web server, to set up a web server, you need to define some kind of address.
Yes.
Right?
So
and if you have DNS and all that, then it's kind of a complicated thing. If you just have an IP address, so long as it's reachable, it's more straightforward. But to set up the DNS stuff, I mean, that's, for example, in the private cloud, that's a whole, a whole page of setup has to do with that whole thing, if I'm not mistaken. So what you are likely to see, were you to do this locally,
just give an IP address.
Yeah, but so the IP address, your channel base would be an IP address. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then there's an API for the channel, for the pub/sub server, effectively, that says create a new channel. Is that right?
Yes, in the server, yes, it creates a new channel. Yes.
And what about the administration of that server? Like, for example, our cloud server has administration, which presumably prevents too many channels from staying open for too long and all that kind of thing.
Oh, well, we do provide some rate limiting and channel limiting. So yes.
Right. But that's all a do-it-yourself situation for somebody with a local okay. But so it seems to me that allowing people to download instances of our, but by the way, another question. I mean, I assume that there isn't some standard channel broker out there which we simply interoperate with. We could just say, download this channel broker.
Oh, well, the idea behind that MQTT server was exactly that, to use the standard PubSub server and embellish it with some of stuff that is specific to Wolfram Language.
Oh, that's interesting. Someone is sending a link to Mathematica Stack Exchange about running Mathematica on Docker. And it's interesting. Interesting. I know, is that from an internal person or is that from an outside person who's got, I have to admit, in the spectrum of how easy is it to do this, this is not super encouraging to me, the number of steps required here. Wow. Okay. Well, it's cool. That's great. Oh, this was like just posted today. That's really cool. I know we've had an internal project to look at Dockerization of this, but yeah, if there's a way to build the stuff in a Docker container, that would be nice, I think. Okay, so someone's pointing out if the create channel worked locally, then it can bind to a local server port, like in the above Docker thing, which will also solve privacy problems that come with the cloud. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Now, but I guess one of the questions is, so I think what we're hearing here is a call for actually getting our PubSub server to be downloadable by people. What's involved in that?
Well, we need to clean up the code. We need to, if we are happy with the long polling protocol only, then we just need to clean up the server.
Well, I mean, look, one protocol is better than no protocols.
Yes, I agree.
It's not the best protocol. I mean, what are the other ones that we are? There's that web-based. I mean, that's the WebSockets thing as an alternative. Yes.
Yes, WebSocket and MQTT would be very nice. Both WebSockets for communicating with websites, with social media sites,
well,
and the MQTT.
One of these cases where it's great for our community to help contribute these things, and if we put this, if we can provide the code for the HTTP version, then that's a really good start, and maybe people can contribute the versions for these other, which will be plug compatible. Yes, I mean there's nothing. Or are you saying that's not the case? Is there additional? If the server uses a different protocol, what support do we have to make that protocol work? What support do we have to have outside of the server itself?
Well, we need to communication. We need to communicate to ensure channel options are passed correctly, but that is currently in development. We may be able to separate the server protocol from the channel options protocol. This is what I'm doing right now.
Okay, but so what I'm trying to understand, the documentation that we have over on the left for channel-based communication, how much of it has to change if we support WebSockets or MQTT?
Ideally, nothing. But that is exactly the point I'm making. We need to verify that it changes nothing, and then we can de-experimentalize the thing.
Okay, but But one thing it would change is dollar channel base. Is that not correct?
Oh, yes, of course. But channel base is ideally user configurable thing.
I understand, but what? Okay, if I'm not mistaken, so you're saying the channel base identifies that channel base is somehow gatewaying through things through to HTTP. I'm very confused. How does it know something like channel send? Ultimately, a bunch of bits get sent out, you know, to some port on some server, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What determines, I mean, that pattern of bits is different for MQTT and HTTP. How is the pattern of bits formed?
That is the job of the channel framework client. So the client will understand what needs to be done for the.
So it's going to do negotiation with the server to figure out what the server can accept.
At first instance, we will have a definition of the server, which will say that a server at this address understands this protocol.
Wait a minute. Is the address an IP address, or is the address some kind of DNS, looked up?
Yeah, it's an IP address. Or
okay, so fine. So how does it know if the thing at 10.10. whatever it is? How does it know that that is an MQTT server?
There is in the development there is a server definition file which will say that server at this address understands this type of protocol.
Where's the definition file going?
It can be loaded like any mathematical Wolfram language file.
That's not a good answer, because I'm asking.
Well, it goes with the channel framework for user for our defined. So it goes with the channel framework client, but it can also be loaded from any user file. If user.
No, wait a second. So you're saying if I do channel send right now, if I say channel send, I would say channel send to like %6, and I would say hello.
Yes. And you can add a channel base option if you want, and it will send to a channel.
Okay, but if that was an MQTT, if that was a broker expecting MQTT, what would this look like?
It will be exactly the same, provided that your dollar channel for dollar channel base is pointing to an MQTT compatible server.
But how does it know that it's an MQTT compatible server? Because channel base might just be 10.10.100.200 or something.
Okay. So the current design is that we have a server definition file. So when channel framework loads, it looks up what servers are available.
How does it? How can it look that up? How does it know that? How are the servers broadcasting something or what?
It looks in predefined places.
How does it know what the predefined places are? I mean, if you just created
in the client, we have.
Wait a minute. How can you do that? If you're setting up your own web server, there's no guarantee where that would end up going, right? Or is it going to some local host? Where is it going? I mean, I don't know how this works.
Okay, there is an internal command, add server definition. I forgot the name exactly. It's in the development context. But if you loaded the framework with the default server or servers, and then you want to add another one, you will just execute that command. Add a server, add channel framework server.
It seems like the wrong way to do it. I mean, we've got a channel base. Why does the channel base not say what the server? I don't know what the right thing to do is here, but I mean, for example, why does the channel base not become something like, address, blah, 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 protocol, blah, blah, blah?
It's an interesting idea. Because we have
completely local. What's that?
We have a cloud base which does not have this. So
I understand, but we don't have a protocol. There's no protocol issue for the cloud.
Right. But all our base function, do we have a precedent for a X base function to have an association?
Well, we're about to have system servers is about to have such a thing. System servers will have a lot of complicated configuration stuff for each server, including its authentication information and so on.
Uh-huh.
So I don't think that's, and that Brad would know, Ashby would know about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll make a note because that is an interesting idea. Instead of adding server definition somewhere else, just add it to the channel base, to the base definition.
Someone with handle, see, I don't even know how to parse these handles. Durbo call, hard to know whether that's how it could be. It could be many different things. So I'm not even going to try. But anyway, on our live stream, says if we can do the channel framework locally available, then its handler function can be further linked to a Redis-backed server. It will have great performance.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Yeah, because you can put the messages into Redis, presumably.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this person is encouraging us to get this ready for the next version. Thank you for the encouragement.
Okay.
But I still just want to go through one more time, and we should wrap up soon. But I want to go through one more time how this would actually work. So, what you're saying is, we currently have this web server based channel broker that's sitting in our cloud at this known address.
Mm-hmm.
And in a private cloud, part of the private cloud configuration is to determine that address.
Well, in the private cloud, we can define a different channel base.
Yeah, obviously. But my question, how do we pick up? How does the desktop client, for example, the desktop client, I see, does Cloud Connect determine the channel base?
Not currently, they're independent because you can run different clouds against the same channel broker and vice versa.
But so there has to be some mechanism, and it may have to work through the system servers mechanism, whereby the desktop client, and it also relates to persistent values in the cloud, the desktop client has to be able to pick up the, has to have an easy way to pick up the addresses of things like channel brokers. That's an issue for the system service business. But okay, let's come back to this. So somebody takes the existing Node.js server and puts it in some random place in their IT infrastructure. And it's freely possible to do that. Okay, so then they would either hook it up to have a particular address, but the thing that our system doesn't know is that thing at that address is expecting HTTP, right?
Yes, for now it only handles HTTP. So
I understand that. But in the future, the question is, how do you know? Okay, here's a super naive question. I mean, maybe I'm confused about something here. Don't you have to give a port number for? I mean, in other words, if it's going to use some protocol, I mean, isn't port 80 is what you would expect the web server to use, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it's perfectly legitimate question. HTTP and HTTPS have the default ports, but you can, in fact, in channel base, if it's, for example, listening on a non-standard form, you can just add the colon and your port number.
No, I understand that, but my question is, to know that it's using MQTT, does MQTT have a standard port?
Yes, and MQTT-S, they also have a different port. But we will have to have this protocol identification somewhere, either in channel base.
Right, but it's obviously in, where is the channel base? Okay, so yeah, we need to specify it in channel base because the channel object, wait a minute, the channel object refers to a channel base, right? Every channel object refers to a channel base.
For the
Now,
object, yes.
Is it totally obvious? Why is it the protocol not part of the channel object?
It can be. It can be as an option, yes.
Okay. I think we have to wrap this particular meeting, but okay, I think we're going to need a separate discussion. But I think one thing that's come out of this is the importance of getting the existing server, the existing channel broker server, prepped for release. And that release could be asynchronous. If I'm not mistaken, that could be asynchronous from the version release, because it's basically just being put out as a downloadable thing that people can install wherever they want.
Indeed.
Correct?
Yes, it's better distributed.
Okay, so, but nevertheless, the thing that still has to be established is, how do I identify what type of channel broker it is, and so on. Okay.
Yes, it's in the development, but you have not seen it yet. We should discuss it at some point.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I think that's so. The basic conclusion is channel stuff has to be that it has to be left experimental. Someone is asking here, do you need channel-based init function, which would set all the parameters, protocols, ports? Yeah, the problem is that the reason this is kind of a mess is that everybody, I mean, maybe the better way to do this. Okay, I've got a better idea. Yes, every channel broker needs a configuration file. At very least saying what protocol it's using, but maybe it needs other information. I don't know if it does. Maybe the channel broker should be proxied through, maybe the configuration of the channel broker should be proxied through a cloud object, which could be then shared. Because one of the issues is, a typical pub/sub connection, there are two sides to it, so to speak. And it's no good. You could have all the fancy information you want, but the reason you're using it is because something else is communicating with it, and that information also needs to be given to the other thing. Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I mean, a typical other end of that communication channel would be something in the data drop world, if I'm not mistaken.
It could be now. The current channel broker has a channel. I forgot. Channel broker action function, which can direct your messages to data drop.
No, I'm asking a different question. So when you connect things to data drop, right? You connect, a random electric imp to data drop. What is the? Oh, I see. That's just a direct connection to data drop. That's not going through the channel framework.
No.
What's the connection between the channel? But there are devices which want to use pub/sub.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So how does that work? Is there a generic pub/sub connection for data drop?
I believe not, but data drop can theoretically redirect messages to the channel broker if you want.
No, but I'm asking the question.
I would approach it from the other end. If your IoT device wants to pass messages through the channel broker instead of data drop, because data drop is designed to store messages permanently or semi-permanently. So if you want your clients to process messages from your IoT device, you would just route that messages through an HTTP request currently into our channel broker server, and that's it. You just need to execute an HTTP request on the IoT device side, and your messages will go automatically to our system. And Wolfram Language clients can receive these messages, or some cloud function can be executed just like you do with the API request.
Okay, we should wrap up here. All right, thanks to everybody. Thanks particularly to the folks on the live stream. Lots of very interesting, good, and encouraging comments. Okay, see you all soon.
Yep, thanks. Bye.
Bye.